to play funding? Well, it's part of the COVID-19 crisis package from Sport England. So there's now been £220 million invested by Sport England into grassroots and community organisations since the COVID pandemic. For this particular fund, there's £21.5 million in there, and that's split into 3 different opportunities. So one is around the small grants, which is £15 million. That was originally 10 million, but an additional £5 million has been added to that. There's a community asset fund of £5 million as well. And there's also a crowdfunding opportunity as well. These 3 funds are all focused around a safe return to play and narrowing the inequalities gap in sport and physical activity. So all 3 of these are not about new participation, new activities, or getting more people physically active. It is solely focused around that return to play, your audience and your community that you're already engaging with before, and ensuring their safe return to play. So with any of these, and I guess it goes with kind of any grant applications that you're going to put in, there are 2 main factors of how you, 2 main factors about getting a grant. And they're really simple, I know, but I think it's worth really making this point clear. Is 1, are you eligible for the fund? So I think everyone on the call today, I've double checked. I believe you are all eligible. It's surprising how many groups, organisations or companies will try and chance their arm when they're not eligible, just on the off chance that they might be successful. But rarely does that actually get you over the line. So yes, hopefully you're all eligible for this fund. And then 2, does your actual project or what you're applying for fit the criteria? So the criteria here, and especially for these 2 funds, are very specific. So there is quite a long list of what they will and will not fund for this, and it's quite strict. So we'll go through that criteria in a little bit more detail further down the presentation. So I'll pass over to Juliet.
So for all of you on the call today, we're really keen to make sure that there's no detail not covered, or that you leave with any uncertainty about these 2 funds. So hopefully we'll go through some real in-depth detail on both these funds. So as Lee's already mentioned, we're going to go through the details of both the Return to Play Small Grant Fund and also the Return to Play Community Asset Fund. And the great news is that both the eligibility criteria and priorities for this funding is the same for both funding avenues. So in terms of who is eligible for these funds, as Lee said, we've already checked and we're hoping that everyone on today's call sits within one of these categories. So these are a non-for-profit voluntary group or sports club, also a non-for-profit community club or organisation. A registered charity is also eligible, as well as a non-for-profit company or a community interest company or other social enterprise. And then finally, also a leisure centre operator who's operating a single site can also apply for this funding. We are going to go into the specifics of the difference between each fund and what it's looking to support. But for those specifically looking at applying for the Community Asset Fund, you need to note that if applying for a grant in excess of £25,000 or more, you must either own your community asset or at least have a lease agreement with ideally 7 years or longer remaining. Also worth noting that Sport England are also keen to support a wider range of community clubs and organisations that are not traditionally seen as a sport organisation. So you don't have to be a sport organisation to apply for this fund. However, physical activity or sport should be an established and significant part of your core offer. So to give you an example of an organisation that myself and Lee work with on a regular and local basis, we have an organisation, to give you an example, called Motivated Vines in Basildon, and very much their focus is around mental health and well-being, supporting the local community around staying mentally well and looking after their health and well-being. However, a real key area of how they do this is through giving and supporting a delivery of a sport and physical activity offer. So this organisation is a community interest company. They might not be seen as a traditional sport organisation, but actually they can prove that sport is an established part of their core offer. So this makes them eligible for this fund. Next slide, please, Lee. So who is not eligible? So when looking at who isn't eligible, and this is going back to the point that Lee made earlier, if you're not eligible, it doesn't matter how good your project idea is. Unfortunately, it just won't be funded by Sport England in this instance. But we recommend that you speak to us, as we might be able to help identify other funding opportunities that we're aware of currently in the sector and further wide. So these funds won't support an individual or sole trader. They won't fund a statutory body or education establishment, including academies and universities. But this is a great example of some wider funding that we are aware of as an active partnership. We're aware of some additional funding that's going into schools right now to help to return to play as well, making sure they're opening their facilities. So this would be a great example of talking to us and seeing if we could find some alternative funding. They won't fund a leisure centre operator operating more than one site, a national governing body or an active partnership like ourselves, Active Essex. They won't fund a commercial or for-profit entity or an organisation delivering football-only activities. And this is mainly because Sport England already do quite a lot of work supporting football through the Football Foundation. So the idea is that anyone who is looking to do some football focused activities, go and talk to the Football Foundation and your local FA, and the same support should be available, or similar support should be available. Next slide, please, Lee. So then if we look at the priorities for both these funds, for anyone who might have looked at applying or may have been successful in receiving small grants or community asset funding from Sport England before, it's worth noting and pointing out that these priorities under the return to play have changed. And this is because Sport England have adapted these programmes to support clubs and organisations in the best way that they can in response to lockdown, and also prioritise supporting those clubs and organisations nationally who we know have been more adversely affected in the last 12 months due to national restrictions. This means, first and foremost, the priorities will be given to organisations located in areas of high deprivation. And how we measure areas of high deprivation is through something called the Indices of Deprivation, or what we'll call going forward as an IMD area. IMD are on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being areas of highest deprivation and 10 being areas of lowest deprivation. And Sport England initially want to focus on supporting those organisations in IMD areas 1 to 3, but have now expanded this to potentially working with organisations in 1 to 5. So if you're an organisation that is in an IMD area 1, you have higher priority on Sport England to receive this funding than if you are, for example, in 5. We recommend that you use either the Postcode Checker to see where your organisation sits, or the link to this interactive map. And this will help to identify where your organisation sits. If you sit in an area identified as an IMD area 1 to 5, at this current time, we would recommend, as long as you hit the rest of the criteria, that you continue with an application for small grant or community asset fund. If you're in an IMD area 6 to 10, then we recommend applying for Sport England's crowdfunding option. And this is the return to play active together funding, which we aren't going to go through today, but can signpost anyone interested to, well, Lee's probably going to touch on very quickly, because there might be some organisations here today who might find that just useful to find out a little bit more. But there is other workshops and webinars on this fund, and also potentially a drop-in session that we're looking to hold one-to-one with clubs to discuss any applications they think going forward for this. It's also worth noting that the interactive map might be able to help you evidence that you might be, for example, sitting outside of an IMD area 1 to 5, but you might be able to prove that, for example, you live very close and next to an area of high deprivation, and that you're able to prove that a majority of your users are also coming from that area. So that would help identify you as a higher priority application. Research has also shown that national restrictions have had more an effect on some communities more than others, and inequalities within these groups have unfortunately only grown during this difficult time. And Sport England want to work on reducing these inequalities. Therefore, priorities will be given to those projects working with the following communities. So Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, people on a low income, disabled people, people with a long-term health condition, or people experiencing a greater burden of care because of coronavirus. Furthermore, Sport England are really wanting to support those organisations in most need and those that don't have significant levels of reserve funding available to utilise. These are the organisations that might not survive without this support. Financial balances will be requested as part of this application, and those organisations that have funds sitting there for that rainy day will be encouraged to use this, so this funding can be used for those most in need. Over to you, Lee.
Thanks, Julia. I think, yeah, just to add to the point around the highest priority, if your postcode does not fit in that decile 1 to 3, then that does not make you not eligible for the small grant or the community asset fund. It just means you're not the highest priority. So I wouldn't let that put you off applying necessarily, but it will mean you'll have to make a better case that despite not falling, say, in a postcode area of the highest priority, you will need to evidence that you are working with the priority audiences. And
Lee, sorry to interrupt you. When I go into that postcode checker and put our postcode in, there's no matches at all. Does it only pick up certain areas?
No, it should be able to pick up all postcode areas. I'd suggest taking a look at the map.
Yeah, so I've just done it twice. Sorry, that was it. I won't interrupt you anymore. It just doesn't come up. It just says not recognised or something. So, okay.
Perhaps it's something to pick up with us offline after this.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So moving on. So the Small Grants Fund. Now, the Small Grants itself is, I think, probably going to be the one that most people on the call today will be kind of most likely kind of successful with. There's £15 million in the total budget for it, and there's 9.5 million still to be allocated. Now, as things stand today, there's 47.3% of applications have been successful. So quite a considerable high success rate. So Sport England are definitely looking for reasons to fund as opposed to turn applications down, which is good news. So the Small Grant Fund is seeking to help support sport and physical activity groups, clubs and organisations in responding to immediate challenges of returning to play in a COVID-safe manner. And a real kind of point there, this is around the immediate return to play. So they're looking for projects that can start almost instantly from your award letter. So you can apply for this fund for between £300 and £10,000. You can't apply for more or less. Believe it or not, in the Community Emergency Fund, which some of you will be familiar with from the first lockdown, I did actually see applications turned down because they applied for less than £300. So don't make that mistake. You can apply for 4 different kind of headline things for this. Minor facility alterations, operational alterations, service alterations, and running costs, which I'm going to go through, which was similar to the Community Emergency Fund, and that's been one of the updated criteria recently. So again, just to hammer down that point, applications need to focus on people returning to play or enabling previous projects that you were previously delivering to adapt. That will enable you to resume delivery when it's possible to do so. So again, this is not looking at new projects, new startups. This will not fund you to start All Stars cricket, for instance. It won't fund your village hall to start new exercise classes. But what it will do is fund, if you were delivering exercise classes and you now need to adapt that offer to continue safely, that's the kind of things that will, they're the kind of things that this is looking to fund. And again, going back to them high priorities for the fund, you'll need to relate back to them priorities to be successful with your application, especially if you fall out of that IMD 1 to 3 postcode area. So in terms of what you can apply for, so you can apply for, and this is a mix, this small grants, of revenue and capital costs. So you can apply for minor capital costs for this. So you can apply for reconfiguration and refurbishment to meet your social distancing requirements. You can apply for changes that are required to adhere to published government guidance. You can apply for other coronavirus related adaptations, repairs and modifications, so things like safety screenings, contactless payment systems, etc. You can apply for things like signage and floor markings, inside and out signage as well, anything around kind of promoting social distancing and helping to avoid congestions in places inside. You can also apply for things like pre-visit guidance, marketing and communications. And this is really important actually, because we'll go through slightly later in the PowerPoint around some people's motivations and potential new barriers to getting back to playing sport and physical activity. So you can apply for kind of comms and marketing support around promoting good hygiene and how that you're a safe club, for instance. You can apply for things like cleaning and hygiene, equipment, keeping facilities and equipment clean. You can also apply for additional sports equipment, which will aid minimizing of sharing. So you could have been a boxing club, for instance, that previously had kind of a bag of club gloves that all your members used to turn up and they'd just have kind of gloves out of the bag, whereas that might not be safe and best practice currently. So you may need to be able to purchase additional gloves for your club members who perhaps can't afford it or can't afford their own, for instance. So that's a good example of that. You can also apply for volunteer training costs. So if you do need support with your volunteer workforce for kind of any upskilling around health and safety, social distancing, risk assessments and things like that, you can put that in your overall project costs if applying for the Small Grants Fund. And you can also apply for additional coaching and facility costs. And this could be as a direct response of having to deliver in smaller sizes. So you might have previously delivered exercise classes to 30 people or a dance class to 30 people, but the new government guidelines may say you can only deliver to say 6, 15, and it may differ between sports and activities. So, but obviously you'll have some fixed costs which are the same, or you'll need additional facility or coaching costs. They're the types of things that you can include in your project if that's a barrier to your return to play. And finally, new ways of delivering your activity for your existing participants and members. So I'm sure some of you will have gone to online, delivering different classes. You may need to provide a hybrid kind of offer or model to be able to cater for everyone that you previously have supported with your offer before. So lots of things that you can apply for as part of your overall project for your return to play. But again, quite specific things that it will fund. Now, in terms of running costs, so previously in the Community Emergency Fund, you could apply for fixed costs, and it was very much around that emergency. We're not going to be taking any money over the bar. We're not going to be able to do our fundraising events. We're not going to be able to take in subs, but we have all these fixed costs and running costs. So this is an update to the criteria in the past couple of months. But if you are in decile 1 to 5, you can apply for up to £3,000 for fixed costs, such as rent, electricity, insurance, as part of your overall project. There's no flexibility in terms of your postcode with this one. If you're decile 6 to 10, you can't apply for any running costs. Just finally on that, if you do apply for them running costs, you will need to provide a breakdown of what you're actually applying for. So if it's rent, electricity, waste disposal, you'll need to be able to really give a breakdown of that and over the period of time. And that is the only retrospective cost that will be funded through this, through the small grant. Over to you, Juliet.
Thanks. So as clear as it is for the things that Sport England will fund, it's as clear as to things that Sport England won't fund. And this is specifically due to the specific outcomes and support that this funding is really wanting to achieve. Therefore, we don't recommend submitting applications for projects that include the following. So projects that don't clearly relate to coronavirus challenges, activities designed to support solely new participants, new projects and startup costs. As we've already highlighted before, this isn't about creating new, expanding, it's very much about supporting and helping those members in your club to return to play. They won't help fund running costs, as Lee just said, and utility bills for projects located outside of the priority areas, which is IMDs 1 to 5. They won't help with loss of income or support projects where construction refurbishment projects where building regulations, approval or planning permission still haven't been obtained. Unfortunately, it can't help with a replacement of equipment, but as Lee's already highlighted, it can be for additional equipment that's needed to make sure that you're able to still engage the number of members that you had before. And it won't help with existing coaching or other staff costs. Next slide, please, Lee. Just a couple more. So other than the running costs for IMD areas 1 to 5, as Lee's just mentioned, Sport England can't fund projects taking place or incurring costs before the date of a potential award offer letter. So this includes any form of deposits and costs associated with submitting the application. Projects that are not ready to begin within 6 weeks from national and or local restrictions being lifted. Obviously, right now, applications or projects can't be delivered within current restrictions, but Sport England want projects to be ready as and when these restrictions are being lifted. The project can happen and begin within 6 weeks, but obviously they're not expecting any delivery to happen while restrictions aren't allowing anything or any delivery to do so. It can't help with cost benefiting an individual or those for participants under the age of 5. It also can't support retrospective funding, so they're unable to support costs for items or goods or services that are already purchased and ordered. Furthermore, costs that aren't directly responsible for the applicant to cover. And again, finally, football only or football dominant projects, as we've already stated, there's other options for that, for them projects to be funded through the Football Foundation.
So the application form for this and the application process. So it's really simple. It's online. It's an online form via Sport England. They have an online application portal. So you need to make an account. And then this is all done online. It's one that you can go back to, you can save, you can log back in and go back to it. But for the Small Grants Fund, there's 2 main questions that it's going to ask you. And you have a 500 word limit for both. So there's 3 main sections: about your project, delivery and budget. But the 2 main written questions are: please describe your project, include who will benefit from your project and what the difference it will make to them. So in this section, you're going to really need to make it clear to Sport England kind of who your audience is, the people you work with, your kind of overarching project and why it's needed and why you need the funding to support your audiences and who you're talking about and why they need this funding to help them with returning to play. You've got 500 words to do that. On the application form as well, there's a little question mark there which acts as a prompt. There's a few other bullet points underneath them that will help you structure your question for this. So yeah, be really honest and simple and clear and concise with it. You don't need to be a kind of bid grant guru, I guess. Sport England are very much looking for the best ideas that hit their criteria. You don't need to like an expert level of skill to be able to fill this in. And in terms of delivery of your project, so this is around kind of what you're actually applying for. So think about the resources that you need and the steps that you need to take. So you need to almost bring Sport England on the journey with you of your project. So the key milestones and dates and times that you're going to make this project happen, and the resources that you're going to need to make that happen. So who's going to get involved in delivering this project? Is it your club coaches and volunteers? What kind of equipment, what are you purchasing to help with this return to play? You might want to reference kind of your marketing plan or how you're going to support the key audiences that we've referenced before with their return to play, and alleviate any kind of anxieties or barriers that they're kind of adversely being affected with return to play. And then finally, you just need to provide a basic budget. So you'll need to provide a breakdown of any potential funding will be spent on, and there's actually kind of a drop down of the different types of funding that you can actually apply for. So again, it's really simple. You'll also need to say when your project will start and when your project will finish. So there's time and date on there as well. Now, in terms of a deadline, it's the 30th of June. So this is for the small grants. So you've got until the 30th of June to apply for this. Like I say, there's £9.5 million in the pot that currently has to be spent by the 30th of June. And like I've just said, Sport England are not after the best written applications here. They're more interested in reaching their high priority audiences and places, and funding the things that, like I say, really are preventing people from returning to play. So you don't need any supporting documents at the time of the application. It's a really simple process, and you will find out within about a 3-week turnaround if you do apply. If you are successful with your small grant, you need evidence of a bank account set up in your own names or your own organisation's name, and you'll receive an award agreement by email, and that will state the purpose of your award, any terms and conditions, along with the monitoring and evaluation requirements from Sport England. Back to you, Juliet.
Thanks, Lee. So moving on to the Community Asset Fund. And again, this fund has a slightly different focus to the Small Grant Fund. So the Community Asset Fund is specifically looking to provide capital funding to help local sports clubs and organisations to adapt and open important places and spaces so that people within their community can return to play and physical activity safely. The focus is on responding to the immediate challenges of sport and physical activity returning to play. So, as with the Small Grant Fund, due to the current situation, priorities for this fund has changed from the historic Community Asset Fund that Sport England have been running for the past couple of years. So currently Sport England will not be funding general capital works such as improvements to clubhouses, courts, nets, etc. However, awards can be made for between £10,000 to £50,000, and they split this into small scale investments and medium scale investments. So for small scale investment, they range this from £10,000 to £25,000, sorry, and the investment will address any immediate work required to adapt your place or space to enable a safe return to play. Their medium scale investments then range from £25,000 to £50,000, and this investment will address more substantial, but it's still immediate changes that must be required, that are required to a facility or a space to enable a safe return to play. It's also worth mentioning at this point that Sport England allocated a £5 million budget towards this fund, and unlike the Small Grant Fund, actually the large majority of this pot has already been awarded, So we're aware currently that there is 0.35 million still to be allocated. Furthermore, success rates of applications is also lower than the small grants. Currently, this stands at 15.28%. And this might be due to it currently being more popular and therefore more competitively processed, but also people potentially not following the criteria or hitting the priority areas that Sport England are clearly asking for. Next slide, please. So if we're looking at what you can apply for within the Community Asset Fund, they do want to help adapt the way that you use a place or a space to meet the return to play guidance. So this can be, for example, by creating one-way circulation systems, improving the ventilation or access arrangements of your space. They want to help convert existing spaces to help meet the social distancing requirements. So this may be helping to create additional changing rooms, shower rooms, etc. Also making improvements to buildings or open spaces to enable activity to take place potentially at a temporary arrangement. So this could be a vacant warehouse, shop or community centre. Also covering an outdoor area, for example, or installing a temporary floodlights to enable activity to take place outdoors. And just to note that your project must be fixed, permanent or semi-permanent. Capital works and applications for non-coronavirus related works will not be accepted during this time.
So what you can actually apply for through the Community Asset Fund is, what you can't apply for, so projects that are not clearly related to coronavirus challenges and returning to play. So there's been a few questions in the chat sent over to us around kind of existing capital projects, redevelopment, potential leaky roofs before. Can this support applications to that? The answer is, in this case, no. This is very much around a return to play challenge that has been exacerbated because of coronavirus. So if coronavirus made your roof leak, then you've got a case, but unfortunately not for this one. So you may have to look at other capital funds for kind of general maintenance or things not related to return to play. A good example of a club in Essex that we know has been successful with this is a trampoline club that lost their facility during COVID. They found a new facility but have nowhere to store their trampolines. So they have been successful in finding their new home and building kind of an extension onto an existing facility that will home their equipment. So they were able to clearly demonstrate that their need for this money was because of something that had happened from coronavirus, and that was that their kind of existing facility had chucked them out. You can't apply for revenue only projects through this. Go back to the small grants if you're looking at revenue only projects. Again, routine maintenance and repairs from resulting wear and tear. You can't. This is not something that you can apply for. Anything retrospective. So if you started works already, you can't receive any funding through this for anything that you've already paid for. And that's the same with the small grants as well. So there was a question in the chat around, we'd pay for cleaning equipment in the first lockdown. Is this something we can now receive money for? To get back, and the answer for that would be no. You would be able to apply for if you need additional equipment to return, but if you've already got it, the answer is no, you wouldn't be able to cover some costs on that. Any capital projects that are not able to significantly support return to play within 6 weeks of your awarded letter, again, is not eligible for this. So this is quite a short, medium term capital project. So if that's something you're unable to do, you wouldn't be eligible for this. Nor would be projects seeking to adapt or improve social or spectator spaces. So this is very much around enabling physical activity to happen again. So if you were looking to improve your social space or spectator spaces, you would need to make a significant case on how that will enable you to go back to physical activity and people be active. So if you can't open your club without an improved social space, then you've got a case. But general, we want to improve our kind of spectator area of our club. You wouldn't be eligible for that. It has to result in people coming back to playing. Projects seeking or adapting to create spaces to attract new participants and extend your offer. So again, I think we've been quite clear throughout. This is not about new participants for either fund. Again, the application form, it's through a portal. So Sport England have a community asset application hub. And again, really easy online application form, but it's just a slight few more questions that you're asked for this one. So you'll have to, so the questions for this one, please tell us a bit about your organisation. Please tell us about your project. How do you know your project is needed? Tell us about the people who will benefit from your project. Tell us a little bit how you'll make this project happen. And again, it doesn't need to be completed all at once. You can save it and come back. And each question, again, has prompts to help you with the answer. What I would say at this point is if you do go to put an application in for either of these funds, although they are online, make sure you save it as a Word document, because there's some of the information that you'll be putting into these application forms that may help you in the long run, or for another application or for another funder. So I don't think that's in our top tips actually, but it probably should have been. So make sure you save that on a separate document, any submissions you put in for different grants and funds. So again, it's a 3-week turnaround, but for this one, if you're successful, you'll need to be able to provide your constitution, your financial accounts, your organisational bank account details. You'll need to be able to evidence your security of tenure. So you'd need to give details of your lease or freehold. We said you need a minimum of 7 years on that ideally. You'll also need to evidence that you have appropriate safeguarding policies and measures in place. And then for higher risk sports, you'll need to provide affiliation to your national governing body of sport. They're the two funds. I'm passing back to Juliet just to finalise some top tips when applying for them, and then we'll go into kind of Q&A after that. Appreciate we're slightly overrun, so after Juliet's finished this section, if you want to chip off, you're more than welcome to. And like I say, we'll get this on YouTube as soon as possible. Back to you, Juliet.
Lee, yeah, as he's already mentioned, and I think Lee's been given some great top tips throughout this presentation. We have pulled together some tips for any application, specifically these ones or ones going forward. I think these are all really great things to bear in mind. They might be really simple and really obvious, but actually if you can follow this real simple process, then we hope that you'll have more success in your application process. So first of all, as I said, really simple, make sure you read the guidance, rules and criteria. As we've highlighted numerous times throughout this presentation, if you don't hit them, the likelihood is you're not going to get funded. So there is really no point in you putting the effort and time into an application. So really do make sure that you read that guidance and criteria and make sure that you are proposing a project that fits everything that the funder wants to hear. Don't rush the application. Lee's gone through the application processes today. I think you'll hopefully all agree that they're really quite simple, 1 pages, couple of questions, but they do require some time, some respect, probably some space away from some children and loud noises and distractions. Give it the time and respect it requires. Along the same sort of lines, making sure that you're reading the questions carefully, and answering what they're asking you to present. But this goes into question 4, but be honest, tell your story, clearly state where you are, who you are, but don't try and emphasise or overpromise something, as you're really only setting yourself up for failure, and that's definitely not what you want to be doing or that Sport England want to be doing either. We recommend that you don't write the bid alone. This can absolutely or should be a shared task with at least one other person. This might be someone else from your committee. But it also really helps getting someone else to read the application who maybe hasn't been involved in the process, who doesn't know anything about your project. We often think that we've got everything in and we understand it, but actually if you have someone else read it from their perspective, do they actually really understand everything that you're trying to get across to the funder? Again, answer the questions, don't wander away. They're asking the questions for a reason. They want to hear the answer that they're asking. So always be clear and concise. And on the same lines, we recommend that you look at their frequently asked questions. There may be some extra detail that you can gain from looking at these questions, and also it might answer any questions that you might have about the fund without having to go directly to the funder. We also recommend looking at the research your needs section on the Support England website. So Lisa's going to go into a bit more detail of what this entails and how it might help your application.
Just to finalise as well, there is a third option for this funding. It is return to play crowdfunding. So crowdfunding, for those of you that aren't aware, is a rewards-based. I'll start that again. So crowdfunding is essentially you as a club, group or organisation running a campaign requesting support from the community for what you're looking to raise money for. So we've had lots of different examples over the pandemic around kind of saving our club examples. But as we go into the return to play option, it may be that you may be interested in trying to raise some money for your return to play. So we've been quite clear around some of the criteria and what Sport England are looking to fund through the small grants and the community asset fund. This is a kind of additional opportunity for you, which offers match funding and has kind of a slightly more relaxed and flexible criteria to it. So there's no stipulation on IMD or your postcode areas. It's eligible for all, as long as you are kind of a not-for-profit organisation, all of the kind of lists that we said at the beginning. And we would definitely recommend just taking a look at that. So on the 16th of March, 3:30 to 4, there is a webinar being run by Crowdfunder UK. If you go on our training and courses page, we're going to do a crowdfunder clinic as well. So there's one-to-one support available to you as well, if this is something you're interested in. Other support available from us. So we have a support for the sector website. On there, we've got the latest funding opportunities, safeguarding. We try to group all of the things that you may need as a kind of community group or organisation. You can check that out, and there's a link there. And then one final thing as well is on the Club Matters website, there's a few documents that I would suggest taking a look at. And most importantly, I would say, is the reopening toolkit for clubs and organisations. So this one on the right, it's a really comprehensive document that gives you kind of a template to work through with your return to play. And it's if you use that, it's a brilliant kind of development plan and will aid you with a safe return to activity. So do take a look at them. So here on this slide is, so the top link there is the small grants portal. So you'd need to make an account there if that's where you're interested. If you're interested in making an application to small grants, community asset fund there, you've got Sport England's number and email address there. And then everyone on the call today should also have my email address if you want to pick anything up with me or Juliet one-to-one. There's also the links there to the small grants and return to play. Everyone will receive these slides, like we said at the beginning, and then we should also have that up in our YouTube channel as well. So thank you to everyone for attending this afternoon. Hopefully you found that useful. You're more than welcome to put some questions and answers in the chat, and I'll just quickly go through some of them because I see we've had a few. I'll quickly flick through. So we've had a question around location, saying that we we work in an area of, our postcode is in a deprived, we're based in one location, but work in multiple deprived areas, which has been hard for us to argue to funders before. Are you still eligible or a priority? I guess advice on that point would be is Sport England want to reach the people that need this most. So if you are working with audiences that are more deprived or do have a additional need or need additional support with their return to play, then still put an application in, and you just need to make that really clear in your application form. So a good example would be is on the research you'll need page on the Sport England website, there is kind of a number of bullet points there around some key audiences and some of their latest research and insight, and one of them is that 7 out of 10 adults are still worried about exercising with others. So in your project you may say you may be able to evidence that some of your members or audience or people you're working with have perhaps raised some concerns about the return to play or exercising with others. So your actual project and the things that you're applying for is around alleviating people's concerns around exercising with others, and you're going to do that by putting in floor markers, social distancing, advice on your website, screens across the bar, etc. So that's kind of how you need to build up your application to make you more of a priority to Sport England. So, and that's especially important for those of you that don't fall in that kind of top IMD 1 and 2 and 3 kind of postcode area. So hopefully that answers that. Are you still eligible if you've received the grant from the ECB Return to Play Cricket Fund? It doesn't make you not eligible for it, but what I would ask at this point would be, are you applying for the same things, or do you need additional funds to help you with your return to play? So like I say, if you're not in one of them high priority postcode areas, you're going to definitely need to evidence that you work with a priority audience, or that your organisation has kind of is almost running hand to mouth, or is significantly kind of looking at being in crisis from the amount of funds that you do have. So hopefully that Return to Cricket grant will have supported you with that. But if you do need additional funds that are eligible for through this, then it wouldn't make you not eligible to apply again. There's been a couple of people put their postcodes in while on the call. If you do have an issue with trying to work out your IMD area, then just follow up with me afterwards and I'll find that out for you, not a problem. What dates did the changes come into place? As someone had put in an application before Christmas, that was unsuccessful. So when this fund originally came out around that time, the high priority for it was IMD 1 and 2. And then it changed to 1 and 3, and now there's been a little bit more flexible with running costs and things up to 1 and 5. So over time it has gradually relaxed in terms of specific postcode areas and some of the priorities. What I would say is, if you are intending to now put another application in, it doesn't stop you. You can apply again if you have been unsuccessful, but I would suggest taking a look at your application, understanding the reasons potentially or the things that you applied for, and then just double cross-referencing that with the criteria and seeing kind of thinking why that wasn't funded, and then perhaps going back to writing a new application based on kind of the updated criteria. Yeah, recordings and slides will be sent straight after today. You can share that with your committee members, not a problem. We run a gymnastics club at a school, and you've had additional costs for cleaning equipment before in previous lockdowns. These costs will continue, can we claim, as they were changes made before and not new changes. So you'll be able to apply for any costs incurring from your return, but just to make that clear, if you've already purchased your cleaning equipment or you've already purchased your return to play markers, etc., then you will not be able to apply for retrospective costs. So hopefully that answers that one. Funding available for Clubhouse redevelopment projects. I think that come up before we covered the community asset fund, but yeah, just to be clear, any community asset or capital Clubhouse projects and funds, it has to be coronavirus related. So examples like extensions to a changing room. We need an additional changing room because we can't get, we've got too many people inside, or in that particular changing room now it's too small, so we need an additional one. Or our shower facilities, we don't have enough for the amount of people to adhere to social distancing rules. So it's, again, it's all because of, it has to be coronavirus related. I'll keep banging the drum, and if you do put an application in, keep banging the drum yourselves, thinking, is this coronavirus related? Is it hitting the criteria? Does community asset fund support interior repairs to clubhouses following the roof leaks? Or I think I covered that one already. Is finding a new home a part of the criteria, or just the storage at a new home? No, if you have been thrown out of your venue because of coronavirus, or the facility has changed, or you may have been in a school facility previously that have said, no, we're not opening our doors anymore, just as an example. So you now need to find a new home. You can apply for costs because of that. So any costs that have incurred from you losing your venue or your home, they would be eligible for this. Most sports clubs, no. On both applications, it says they won't support football only projects. I run walking football for the over 45s. Would this be eligible? I'd say no, it wouldn't be eligible for this, because like we say, the Football Foundation will be releasing at some point a similar fund to this for football. Having said that, if you do need funding for kind of older adults that is supporting their physical, mental and social health, there will be other funds out there available to support this. PowerPoint by email, yeah, we'll be sending them out. Slides will be going out. Can you apply to both Crowdfund 1 and other parts of your program? So you can apply for both. So you could have a crowdfunding campaign, and then you could also apply for Return to Play, but you wouldn't be able to match fund both. So if you've got one overarching project, how can I put this better? You could apply for a specific projects through the small grants or the community asset fund, one of the other, but you could also potentially crowdfund for kind of a specific session or a target audience, or for a specific thing. So I don't know if I've explained that too well, but if you do have any questions on that, maybe just pick that up with me after, and perhaps we could have a call on that. Yeah, I can check your postcode. I'll get back to you on that. I've applied in assessment small grants. Can I still apply for the community asset fund? If you've applied and been successful with small grants, no, you wouldn't be able to apply for the community asset fund, but you would potentially be able to crowdfund and get the match funding from Sport England. Would the grant cover a deep clean of facilities which have been closed for nearly a year? It would, if you make a case for that making people more physically active. So if you do have or operate a facility that needs a deep clean, and you can make a case to say, without this deep clean, we won't be able to get people playing their sport and physical activity again, then yeah, you would be able to apply for that as part of your overarching getting people to return to play. What are the terms for crowdfunding? So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the crowdfunding stuff just now. There's a link there for another webinar. We'll send you the link again for kind of all the terms and conditions on the crowdfunding. And then we're also running a crowdfunding clinic ourselves, which you're more than welcome to come sign up to. It's free. If you go on a training and courses page on the Active Essex website, you'll find details of that there. And I think that may be just about it. So, one is for dance and dementia. So for the dance and dementia and youth group dance, yeah, they're two completely separate projects. So you could apply for a small grants for that, and then you could perhaps crowdfund for your return to play for your youth dance squad, or you're going to crowdfund to support local people with dementia, for instance. Or you could do both, potentially with them. We support an inner city team, likely to be in a different decile from the club's location, providing them with playing facilities. Could I make an application on these lines? So yeah, absolutely. Like I say, it's more about the audience than your postcode. So if you, I'll give you an example. My club sits in IMD 8, but it's within walking distance to the borough's most deprived wards or communities. So if I was going to put an application into this for my club, I would be saying, although we're IMD 8 or appear to be in a affluent area, we know that a number of our members come from kind of more deprived communities, and we support them with X, Y, Z to ensure that everyone can continue to play regardless of their background or financial situation, for instance. So hopefully that covers that. So yeah, you would be eligible to apply for that. Is finding a new place to play because of COVID applicable to Community Asset Fund, for example, shared changing rooms previously? If this is an issue before COVID, then it's not. But if there has been if because of what's been happening during COVID, or I see, because I suppose so for this one, you'd need to make, if you're currently sharing changing rooms and you want to now apply for Community Asset Fund for more facilities or changing rooms, you would need to make a case to say, we currently share our changing rooms. It now means that we have X amount of people within them. They're all cramped, additional space to be able to allow the same amount of previously return to play. And so our application would be around adding an additional changing room to our existing facility, so we can continue to return to play safely and cater for all our kind of audience or members. So yeah, you would be eligible for that. But again, with them and Community Asset Fund, Juliet said on one of the slides, I think that it's about 15% success rate. So you've only got a 15% success rate on that. So just bear that in mind. And that is kind of coming to the end of what was allocated for it. So there was £5 million in the pot for the Community Asset Fund. There's only £350,000 that hasn't been committed. And I've seen on the kind of portal on there that actually there's quite a few applications already in waiting a response as well. So just bear that in mind. So if you are high priority for it, then I wouldn't want to put you off. But if you're not highest priority, or you're not working with one of them high priority audiences, then I